What's up, guys? It's Andy Priscilla.
This is Director X.
This is Amberly Lago.
This is Sina Sadaf.
Yo, this is Apathy of the Demigods.
This is Bradley and Michael Francis here.
This is Chris Voss.
Yo, this is Charlie Tuna.
This is Ryan Serhant.
This is James Harris.
Hey, this is Steve Sims.
Hey, what's up? It's Billy G.
And you are listening
to the Run GpG podcast.
Stop playing. Please stop.
Today, I am pleased to be joined by a man who needs very little in the way of an introduction. Alvin Joyner, better known as Xzibit, is a multi-platinum rapper. He's an established actor, producer, as well as a successful entrepreneur and businessman. From iconic albums and legendary tours to TV and blockbuster movies, we're excited to talk about his incredible career, some highlights, what he's doing now, and a lot more with the one and only X to the Z, Xzibit. X, welcome to the Run GpG podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And man, there is so much I do want to talk to you about today. But to start with, I do want to paint the picture and get a bit of the pre-Xzibit biography, which is interesting. It's super, super interesting because when you say the name Xzibit, you're automatically thinking West Coast legend, you're synonymous with the history there, but you're actually from somewhere else. So the first question is, take us back to the beginning. Who is Alvin Joyner? Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And how did your journey in hip hop begin?
Wow. Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I was born in 1974. Both my parents were teachers. They had met in college. My sister and I were that was the nucleus of the family. And, we were just in Detroit. I just lived in the Midwest. I was there for, till I was 9. When I was 9, my mother passed away. And then my dad got remarried and we lived out, and they wanted to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I lived in Albuquerque for, I guess like 7-8 years, till I was like 17, 18. And then I moved from New Mexico to California, where I started my career and my life in general,
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's surprising. I think that's, one of the most badass things about you is that you weren't native to like Los Angeles or the West Coast, but you ended up dominating the locals and becoming a part of that West Coast history. Is that the way you see it too?
I see it as being able to come into a environment that was thriving and had rules and regulations and was able to assimilate and able to blend, well with the creative process that was happening. I think when you level the playing field with creativity, I think it's how you stand up in that environment. And I think that's a better explanation of what happened when I came to West Coast, because by no means do I feel like, West Coast wouldn't be here if I wasn't here. That's not true. What it was a standard that I had to rise to. And so that's exactly how I feel about when I came to California and started learning how to become an artist, and then what that entailed and what that took from me and the sacrifices that it took for me to get there was something I was willing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of touched on it. Maybe you had to up your game a little bit because you weren't from there. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I always like to ask this question, like, who are your earliest influences in music? Like, what hip hop albums did you grow up listening to, or did you?
When I was first learning of music, I didn't come in immediately with hip hop. I used to actually listen to my family's albums. My parents used to have get-togethers in the basement. They would play all the Motown. They would play, all of the old classics, everything from, the greats, Marvin Gaye, all to Christopher Cross, you name it. You know what I'm saying? It was like, a wide variety of music. And I also was playing the violin when I was a child. And so I was really influenced by music, period. And then once I found hip hop, I was able to that's mine. That's my expression. If music had an expression and everybody had to pick one, that was the one that I fell in love with. So once I started listening to hip hop, then it was like, wow, I think the first rap song I ever heard was the Rappin' Duke. Daha, 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 daha. And he was rapping like, I guess he was doing a John Wayne impression or something like that. And so then from there, you know, it was like, oh, wow, you know, I started listening to, of course, Run DMC. My big brother brought home the Raising Hell cassette. I was there to see all of these things happen as a fan first. And then when I got introduced into actually being an artist, then I was able to have these guys become my peers and be able to meet them and be able to speak with them. And they appreciate my craft. It was quite a roller coaster.
Yeah, it would have been mind blowing. So that's a question. Like, how did you get involved with hip hop and rap specifically? Like, I guess the question is, did you jump in as an MC right from the beginning, or were you involved in, you know, something else in the culture there? Like, were you a graph writer, a beat maker, or did you just jump in as an MC and just start, you know, doing verses?
No, I mean, when I first started rapping, it was because it was just out of just leisure. You know, I went through many rap names as a kid, and I never looked at it as a profession. I wanted to actually be an architect. I was taking like computer-aided drafting in school, stuff like that, building bridges, doing diagrams on nuts and bolts and drawing them and, you know, figuring out how to make them fit together. And that's kind of, you know, how I fell in love with putting things together. I used to take apart radios when I was a kid and put them back together. And, you know, sometimes I did it right. Sometimes I didn't do it so right. So things didn't work as well. But that's where my curiosity took me into it. And so once I started doing music, I didn't start like taking it seriously until I came to California and got around King T and the Alcoholics.
Yeah, interesting. And I wanted to ask you, where did the name Xzibit come from? Like, what's the history of that name?
Interesting. So my first rap name when I first started rapping was ICE. And then I was like, you know, like at the time, it was like Ice Cube, Ice T, you know, Vanilla Ice, all these other ices that were out there. I was like, I can't use that. And so then I started like, oh, my name's Alvin, so let's do MCA, you know? And I was like, can't do that. That's a record label. That's you know, that's one of the Beastie Boys. Like I can't use MCA. And so at the time, MC was in front of everybody's name. And so I was like, okay, so let me go somewhere else. And so as I was trying to do this, I was still freestyling. And it was a guy named David and Tony that used to like beatbox at my high school. And so I would always battle these guys. David would beatbox for David. And I mean, David would beatbox for Tony. And they would just house everything because Tony was like saying things off the radio. So I would just come in and do my original written stuff. And so one day I was like Exhibit A and one of my freestyles. And then one of my friends was like, yo, that's it. That's a stick, that, you know, that Exhibit A line. So I started using Exhibit A and I spelled it the way it was supposed to be spelled, with the E. And so once Ebonics came into play, I was like, okay, cool. Let me drop the A and just put an X. And then that's how Xzibit was born, the X and the Z. And so that's how I kind of came up with it, because MCs was just all over the place. And I was tired of, you know, doing things that people kept, you know, coming up with. And I want to be totally original. So I went to the end of the alphabet and chose the X and the Z to say Xzibit. That's
the history of the name.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it before. Very, very interesting. Okay. So you had your first record deal done at the age of 19, right? So how did that happen? And can you describe that time, what it was like for you when you did sign that first deal?
Well, this was back in like 95, 96 when, actually it was like 94, because when I got signed, it took me about a year to put the album together. But at the time, Los Angeles had a really vibrant hip hop scene. It was like the Far Side was out, as well as, you know, the classic gangster rap. And then, you know, Souls of Mischief was coming down from the Bay Area. It was a vibrant, diverse scene. And I was still, you know, learning from the Alcoholics, and King T was the first person to ever put me on the record. So having a lot of respect for, you know, where that came from, I was just part of the scene. I would go to these freestyle battles. I would just be going to the Wake Up Show with Razcast, Saphir, you know, all these other greats that were coming through these freestyle kind of like underground hip hop scenes. And so I never made a demo. I never made a demo tape to be turned in. I never sought out a record deal. I was just in the scene. I did a song called Freestyle Ghetto with King T on his fourth album. From there, I was about to go do a show at Gland Slam, which was Prince's nightclub in downtown. And as I'm about to go out on stage with the Alcoholics, Steve Rifkin comes backstage and says, hey, you know, literally before I walk out on stage, hey, I want to sign you. I was like, oh, you know, okay, I'm about to go do this show. He's like, yeah, just come to the office tomorrow. That's literally how it happened.
Man, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Man. I think some up and coming hip hop artists might be very, very jealous of that story. I do want to ask about the creative process, because I always find this very interesting. Like, you know, you've been responsible for some of the most iconic, you know, hip hop tracks and albums, collaborations of all time. What did your creative process look like at the time? Like, do you think of words and phrases and write them down as they come to you? Or do you start with the beat and work on lyrics after? What does the process look like?
Well, I mean, I use different processes for different times. Sometimes I can write a song or even a piece of a verse and just write it down because I think the words sound good. And then from there, it's pretty easy to create from that aspect. And then sometimes I'll get a beat and then I'll just, you know, be able to write to the beat. But the writing is the most important to me. As I progressed as an artist, I learned to express myself better by not just accepting the first thing I write down. Sometimes you got to be your own, you know, worst critic. And so as I started writing and progressing, I would listen to, you know, the playback and I would see how it hit me and how it felt. And when I wasn't satisfied with that, I would go back and do it again, even though it may be, you know, rocking the room or something that people in the room appreciate. I just don't settle, you know. I always push myself a little harder. And I think that's what the end goal is when you have a process like creating music, creating things that you want people to relate to. So that's exactly how I go into creating music, you know?
Yeah. The great lyricists like you know, of course, I'm friends with Apathy. I mean, it just, the brains are different, you know, perfectionist to a degree, you know, cerebral. So very interesting to hear that. Now, I do want to ask you about the Up in Smoke tour, which was a legendary tour. It was one of your career highlights. I know you've mentioned it. I also saw a quote from you or read a quote from you or something that said it was like, imagine reading the Avengers and then now you're one of the Avengers, right, on that tour. And I thought that was really interesting. Can you tell us what that time was like and maybe, you know, how one of the craziest stories from that tour or maybe the best live moment?
Ooh. I mean, you have to remember, I came in as a fan, and being a big fan of not only West Coast hip hop, but Dr. Dre in particular, it was amazing to be able to be seen in that light, that not only did I rise to the occasion as an artist, but I was being seen by people that I looked up to as a compliment to what they were doing. So once I was able to be on the Dr. Dre 2001 album, as a feature with, you know, the biggest stars on the planet, I felt accomplished. I felt like I didn't waste my time. I feel like I was being acknowledged in a fashion that, you know, not that I deserved, but it was acknowledgement that I was on the right path. And so once I was able to go into, you know, the Up in Smoke tour, that was another highlight that I could never, you know, be thankful enough to Dr. Dre for allowing me to come on his platform and be seen in that light. So the tour itself went off without a hitch. I still believe that it is the best tour that has come out of the West Coast and the best balance that has launched careers and still legendary to this day. So, I mean, it was crazy to be able to, you know, come on that set. You know, Dr. Dre gave me a choice before we went out while we were rehearsing. He said, hey, X, you know, I want you to come on this tour with us, but here's two options. You can have 20 minutes before Warren G at the top of the show by yourself, or you can have 4 songs or 3 songs on my set. That was like, okay. No problem. So
it's not much of a choice, is it? It's not much of a choice.
So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll just wait to be on his set. And it just worked out crazy. You know, I came out there with Snoop. I did a song with him, and it just turned out to be like the launching pad for the rest of my career.
I've heard you talk about, you know, what that tour was like. It's legendary. I mean, it was history making at the time. Do you have a favorite live moment from that tour? Like one significant moment that you could think of, or is it the whole tour?
Well, I mean, there was one magical moment that I don't think anybody will ever forget. We had worked our way back to the West Coast, and I think it was our first LA show. I think it was in Anaheim. We all had come back into town. Dre was very specific about, time and everybody being on top of their stuff and, not f***ing up the schedule. So as soon as we get back to LA, everybody's getting ready to go back to the arena. And so it comes on the news that Nate Dogg has been arrested. Nate Dogg had, been arrested for setting a car on fire and some other I don't know what happened, but it was like really bad. And so we have a show that night. Dre is trying to figure out a way to, fill in for Nate. We had a couple R&B artists. I'm not gonna say no names, but a couple R&B artists were trying to come in and sing his part. And so this one particular artist didn't know the words to the song. So I'm sitting next to Dre. He has a guy, that wrote out all the words, holding up this cue card, next to the sound booth, and the R&B singers up on stage try to hold up, wait, too much knees have looked too soft. It's just not working. So Dre's sitting there, I'm sitting there, and then he's like, shh. So Dre takes off. Fast forward to the night. On Nate's part, the lights go down. Everybody knows this is like he's in jail. And so when the spotlight comes on, Nate Dogg walks out on the stage with the band still from the jail on his hand. Dre had went and bailed him out, and he was able to make the show. And the electricity in that stadium was off the fucking charts. It was like, I get chills thinking of it right now because it erupted, because everybody knew that this motherfucker was in jail. And he was able to walk onto that stage that night and really just rock the show. And we were glad to have him back. And it was just one of those moments you'll never forget because the energy was so live in there. So, it's just a testament to, when things have to happen, then nothing can get in the way.
Man, that's incredible. You're the first one to answer probably the best and the worst live moment together. They were both the same thing, So very, very interesting. It was recently the 20th anniversary of the release of Restless, right? Restless. And I've heard you talk about how much that album actually meant to you. Its longevity, personally, what it meant to you personally. But I also heard the story about how Dr. Dre saw the Restless tattoo on your neck, and that's where the album name came from. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And where did the Restless tattoo come from, I guess?
Well, I got a lot of work done for Mr. Cartoon, and Mr. Cartoon put the Restless font on my neck. So it's been there since I was a kid. And when I was recording the album and I was, about to be done, Dre was standing at the mixing board with me. I guess he saw it. He's like, why don't you name it that? Restless. I was like, ooh, that sounds crazy. You know what I'm saying? And when you get a suggestion from Dr. Dre on something that is a creative choice, you might want to consider it.
Yeah.
So that's exactly how it happened. It's a tattoo that Mr. Cartoon put there, and and it ended up, having more meaning as it went on in life.
Speaking of Dr. Dre, I know you're close with him. Would you say he's a mentor? Like, what was it like working with him? And can you think of some of the best advice he ever gave you?
Well, I mean, he started out as a working relationship and grew into a brotherly relationship. I think that, Dr. Dre considers me a little brother. Like he has great expectations of me, and I never want to disappoint that expectation. I want to rise to that occasion because he's bringing the best out of himself. He's also expecting all of us to do the same. So that's kind of how I see our relationship. And I always look up to him as that. And, it's dope because to have someone of that stature, look at you in that light is really a really good place, a really dope place to be.
Yeah. Would you call him a role model?
I mean, a role model in certain aspects, yes. In certain aspects, you have to look at it as everybody's living their own life, and I never look at people to demonize their good or bad or whatever. I'm indifferent when it comes to that. I look at him as a brother, and nobody's perfect. So, I always look at the way he gets up from his mistakes and the way that he can move past his mistakes and continue to be who he is. So that's what I look at it.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, for a lot of people, he's about more than hip hop. He's a true entrepreneur, success from that perspective. Now you have worked with all the legends, right? Dr. Dre, we just mentioned Snoop Dogg, Eminem, many others. Like when you look back, do you have a favorite collaboration, an album, or a period in your career that stands out as particularly significant to you? Or do you just look at it as one big body of work?
I mean, I think it's easy for me, the way that my career has gone to stay in hip hop. I think the things that I've done outside of hip hop musically are the things that are hard to do. Like I've done, shows with Metallica. I've done songs with Alice Cooper. I've done, songs within Temptation. You know what I'm saying? Like things that are outside of, my realm of creativity or where people don't expect me to be. I think that's a testament of where it stands when it comes to, my favorite moments. Being able to exist in hip hop, but still go out and be seen as a television star and a movie star. Those are the things that I feel like, wow, like I'm able to transcend what people's expectations are and go for things that require real focus and attention.
Yeah, that's a good way of explaining it. If it's cool with you, I want to get I want to name a couple names, and I want to get your first thoughts that come to mind. Just a couple names. We did talk about Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg.
Oh man, that's my brother too, man. Snoop Dogg is an icon. He talked about transcending. He's everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody knows who Snoop Dogg is. Arguably the biggest hip hop persona on the planet. Snoop Dogg will always be synonymous with West Coast hip hop. And to be able to stand with him and stand next to him is an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Eminem.
Oh man, I mean the GOAT. You know what I'm saying? Like Marshall is really a unicorn. I like to call him and Dre and all those other guys unicorns. You don't find them; they just exist. And so when you look at Eminem and what he's done with hip hop and what he means to hip hop and what he means to Detroit and how he decides the direction of his career, no matter what, he stands firm. And that's admirable.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to ask you about Nate Dogg, but I don't think we can top that story that you laid out there. I don't think we can do that. You actually toured with Obie Trice, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you collaborated with him at all, but first thoughts that come to mind when you think of Obie Trice, another legend, right?
Obie Trice, man, I see him as a lyricist. I feel like, a lot of guys don't get the flowers they deserve while they're doing what they do. And Obie Trice is one of those. I mean, I think that, the music that he created is still viable to this day. And I feel like, he deserves more acknowledgement than he gets.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then the last one I want to ask you about is Apathy.
Yeah. Apathy is also one of the lyricists that is like there's a whole bunch of white rappers. You know what I'm saying? Marshall being the top of the scale. Apathy is up there, in my opinion, because he is not only his own person, but his persona, the way he delivers, he understands hip hop in a whole other level. He's not a poser. He's not trying to just get in to be in. He actually loves the culture and he takes time with his craft. And I think that's something that is, unique to him. I've seen him, say some real underground and I've seen him do some punchlines that, wow, like he understands it, he gets it. And I think Apathy is going to, be surprised how he's acknowledged through history when it comes to hip hop.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen him work. His new body of work, like his new music that he's doing, is so hard, so dark, and so incredible to me. I'm blown away. When you hear some and his references. I mean, he's always referencing stuff from the '80s and the '90s, and it's like a flashback. He's really slick, and you got to listen close. That's why I think he's a fantastic lyricist. Okay, so I do want to ask you one question about reality TV. I mean, you were incredibly popular. You blew up, and now you're on reality television on a show. I'm not going to name the show, but it was a cult classic, to some degree. Like people still recognize you from that show. So what did you like or dislike about the experience on reality TV? And what did it teach you about the entertainment business? Like, I guess, to boil it down, is there anything that you wish you knew before you went through what you did with that show?
I mean, it was different. I went through a couple different emotional changes when I did Pimp My Ride. Pimp My Ride was the first of its kind. And back when I started the show, no other hip hop artists wanted to be on reality TV whatsoever. It was taboo. It was like, yo, I'm a real star, so I don't have to do that. But what I viewed MTV and Pimp My Ride as a vehicle for the music. That was my initial thought. Like, oh, if I do this show, then I'll get more exposure. They'll play my videos more, which was not the case. But it did expose me to an audience that otherwise would not have any kind of interaction with me. And so it took me around the planet and introduced people to me through my character and through my personality, and not through my music. And so it was a weird reintroduction to the planet, but it opened up my audience to a way bigger audience. And that's the way I felt, as the show grew. And then it got to a point where, people knew me more for that than anything else. And so that's what I struggled with once I understood how big the show had become. And I was too close to it at the time. And it didn't sit well with me until I was able to, go past that show and understand that, my Q rating was that of the Popes. Like,
yeah, I've heard that.
People could see me anywhere and recognize me, which was very difficult to do. Yes, I had sold millions of records. Yes, I had been involved in some really big music looks, but that show kicked open the door and allowed, a large amount of people to come in and not only see me as an artist, a musician, but see me as a personality, and allow me to go and to do, acting and movies and whatnot. So once I understood that part of it, the blow was slightly lessened, and I was able to accept it on a different level.
Xzibit was more recognizable than the Pope.
Yeah.
How does that feel? After that, I could be wrong about this, but it seemed like you kind of took a break from everything a little bit, right? Breaking that down a little bit. I heard you talk about a turning point in your life. I don't know where I saw this exactly, but you talked about a turning point in your life where in your words, you were feeling sorry for yourself a little bit, and then you helped J.O. Felony, James Savage, in the studio, and you realized it reignited a fire within you to move forward, feel accomplished. And so this is kind of a personal development question, but how does helping others help yourself?
Wow. Well, I'll give you a little backstory on what that is. I had a tremendous amount, after becoming an artist, rarely do you have the faculties to understand that being a businessman and being an artist are synonymous. You have to be one and the same. I was more focused on being an artist than a businessman in my earlier years, and that came back to haunt me. So I was under a tremendous tax debt. I was under a tremendous amount of, exposure for that tax debt. Hip hop eats its own. So as much success as I had, my finances and my stability and my foundation didn't match. So I was really depressed about that. And without having a college education or people that I felt like I could trust and bring into my circle and make me whole again didn't exist. So I fell into a deep depression. And I spent about 5 years literally sitting on a couch. There was no help. There was no person I could go and talk to about what I was going through specifically. And it really put me in a dark place. And so towards the end of that, hamster wheel I was on, I literally had to stop myself. I was drinking heavily. I was, in a depression. It was just day in, day out, same cycle, no movement. And I was really in a place where I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't shake it. And so J.O. Felony, I think I was doing a radio show or something called Open Bar Radio. And I was just doing that and just sending it to K-Day. It was like a radio show I was doing. And I really wasn't doing anything else except that. And he had come to the studio and heard some of the music that I was working with. And, a little while later, he calls me and said, "Hey, I want you to help me with my music. And I was like, I want somebody to help me with my music too. And I didn't know what he exactly wanted from me because I was only used to producing music for myself. And so when he came in, I was like, okay, well, let's just go in the studio and see what happens. And so once that started happening, I started going into the studio, producing for him. And the music that was coming out was really solid, really dope. And he was believing in it, and everybody around us was believing in it. And somehow, during that belief system being transferred around the room, it landed on me too. And so I was able to kind of put one foot in front of the other and go from a crawl to a walk to a run to a sprint. And it took me out of that hamster wheel that I was dealing with. And I guess I say all of that to say, sometimes being inspired doesn't have to necessarily be a selfish thing or be for you in particular. Sometimes, sacrifice and being creative can be put towards other people. And in that process, you'll be able to be inspired yourself. And that's exactly what happened. I was able to break out of my depression and focus, get out of my own head and put that down. It's okay to put it down if it's too heavy. You're not a quitter. You just have to keep moving forward. And once I got that into my daily routine, I was able to focus like, okay, cool. So what I was really concerned about and worried about, which was basically what people were saying about me, which really, I don't give a about that now, was holding me back. And the people that I'm thinking about aren't thinking about me like that. I just have to focus on what I need to do to move forward. And that's exactly what happened when I was working with JL. We came out with a project. It came out really well. People, really, it ignited what he was doing. It ignited what I was doing. And from there, all of these things started happening for me again. And I was able to make my own choices and be able to make better decisions going forward.
What a profound story. And I hope the listeners took notes on that one, because there's such valuable takeaways in that story, X. I don't know if you know this, but James Savage actually did an interview last year where he talked about how you specifically, Xzibit, changed his life. Did you know that? Have you?
I did not know that.
Yeah. I can send it to you. He mentioned how Xzibit changed his life specifically. And have you thought about how you've become a mentor and maybe a guru to others now?
Well, I don't know about a mentor, but I'll tell you some good advice.
The way you made it sound. It's the way you made it sound. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that, man. If I can give people information about my experience, and if we, can get into a conversation that is productive, then I'm all for it. I've made a lot of great decisions. I've made a lot of poor decisions. But at the end of the day, I've been able to live with all my decisions. And I think that's where you kind of want to get yourself to. No one is perfect. No one is, is able to go through life without any struggle. If you don't have any struggle, if you don't have any fears, then you're not living. You have to be able to hit the wall a few times and pick yourself up and keep moving forward. People can learn from my experiences directly or indirectly, then I'm all for that. But I still feel like there's things that I need to accomplish, that I'm still striving for, that I'm still pushing towards. And when I get there, I'll be able to say that I've accomplished a lot with my life. I've done some really cool stuff, but I feel like there's more. And I want people to be able to go through this with me and be able to see what it feels like to win and live on your own terms.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. I got two questions as they relate to that. The first is, you're talking about it. You've started over a few times. I don't want to say reinvented yourself, but what can you say about that internal motivation, like pushing yourself, finding the motivation from within, to get up and go? Because I think you have a very motivational story when you look back, and you can speak with authority about starting over and becoming successful.
Right. I just think that people get so caught up on what other people think of them. That's a dangerous thing to be involved with. We all have 24 hours in a day. What you do with that 24 hours is totally up to you. I've been subject to some of the worst criticism, some of the best praise, and you can't believe either of them. If you believe what people say negatively about you, then you're going to hold yourself back while just, letting people live rent free in your head. So that's a dangerous place. Failure is part of success. So you have to be able to know that, oh man, that didn't work. It's not a reflection of you as a person. It's a reflection of you trying. At least you're trying, And so for me, I've never been afraid to step out on faith. I always encourage people to, do things that aren't in your wheelhouse. Take the time to learn what you need to do and make the sacrifice in a time that you need to better yourself in what you're attempting. And don't just throw your hands up at it and be like, oh, well, I gave it a shot. It's not going to work for me. First, you have to be centered. First of all, I always tell people that you can't just go out and just try everything. Be centered. Find out who you are. Be okay with that. And once you okay with that, then what you love is going to present itself to you. And then you can make better decisions from there. Everything isn't for everybody. You have to be able to push yourself in the right direction and hold yourself accountable. And so I always try to make sure that the things that I'm focused on, I complete them. I've never been afraid of starting over, but I had to stop listening to what other people say about me in the interim, and I think that's a big, big deal.
Man, so many takeaways there. This is going to be one you'll have to listen to a few times because, you've spoken like a true entrepreneur. Execution trumps all. When you get to be about the same age as us, roughly, you start to care less about what people think. And it's funny, right. The younger you are, the more you care about it. As you get older, right. You realize you have less time. Right. So we're just going to do it. Right. I also read a quote that said Xzibit has lived through many dramatic times in his life, so he raps primarily about his own life experiences and is not afraid to reveal himself on a track. And right. I think, a lot of your fans, if not all of your fans, would agree with that. You're authentic and real. I mean, that's coming through on the interview. Can you touch on the importance of authenticity as an artist and why that's so important for longevity?
Well, exclude entertainment, exclude hip hop, exclude notoriety. What you have is an individual. And even though we are all individuals, none of us are unique in our journey in life, right? We all have ups, downs, sad, happiness, family, issues, happiness, just all of these things that we all go through in our individual lives. When I had the opportunity to become an artist on a large scale and people started listening to me, I could be a storyteller or I could tell my story. There's a difference. I decided to tell my story because I knew from being a fan first and being a human and then becoming an artist that my struggles were not unique. Even though they were unique to me, everybody's going through struggle. So why not be able to put myself on the line? And my interpretation of hip hop was always telling the truth. So when I was able to tell my truth and people accepted it and people understood what I was going through, I felt like that was the way I wanted my music to be interpreted. And so that's where it came from. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. That's a big deal. Being able to go out and not only have the tough bravado. Yeah, I've lived through some really tough things. But how you feel about these things is just as important as the bravado you get from the tough talk. I've ruined relationships. I've ruined, things that have, potentially been positive in my life, being who I am. And I've also, been able to show the aftermath of these things in my music. It hasn't always been pretty. And so I feel like that's the balance. That's what needs to be said. That's where we are. And I think that the more people are able to be themselves and the more people that are able to hear my story, hear my words and relate to it, that's what music is for me. Not to be viewed as the toughest guy on the planet because I'm not. There's always somebody tougher. But to be able to say hey, this is what I've been through. This is what I did. Sometimes it worked out. Sometimes it didn't. There has to be a balance in music. And that's where, you have to lead with it by example, and that's why my music plays the way it plays. That's why I speak the way I speak. When I was a kid, I was very angry. I went through the system. I was in group homes. I was in halfway houses, even though I had a family. I had a whole family there, but my behavior and the things that had transpired in the house put me through the system. And my mother passing early didn't help either. So I was a very angry person. I was doing violent things, endangering my life and my freedom, because I was angry. When I found hip hop, I was able to kick, scream, do all these things in a padded room, literally, and not bring harm to myself or others, but be able to express myself through hip hop. And so through that, I think a lot of people felt that, a lot of people heard it, and it was able to turn a negative into a positive. And that's very important to be able to recognize and be able to do. And I think that's what hip hop was for me.
Man, what a breakdown of authenticity and the importance of it. I really appreciate you explaining that. That was awesome. Okay, I do want to touch on your other career briefly, which is the fact that you started making movies. And if you take a snapshot and look back, you have a pretty incredible acting career, right? Like 8 Mile, the X-Files movie, Derailed, Bad Lieutenant, Gridiron Gang, and most recently the Empire series, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, nuts. When you think about it now, you look back, you're actually an established actor, right? Like, how does acting compare to the music industry for you? Like, is it still a rewarding creative outlet?
Absolutely. Acting is something I had to work on, literally. At the height of Pimp My Ride, I got an offer. For people that don't know acting in its realms and its levels, an offer means that they just want to put you in the movie. You don't have to audition. You don't have to do anything except just show up, read the lines. We want you in this movie. The fact that, I was such a popular figure and that Q rating was jumping, I got my first offer, which was, Triple X2 with Ice Cube. Yeah, let's do it. Once I saw myself on the big screen, and that's different on TV, because on TV, you're in people's houses, but in a movie, your face is like 7 feet, 8 feet tall on the screen, right? Whole different kind of communication, right? I saw that movie, immediately thought, wow, I really suck at acting. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is really bad, right? So then I knew at that moment that Hollywood would give you enough rope to either pull yourself up or hang yourself. So I decided to not waste that opportunity. I took myself and put myself into some acting classes. I started doing, like different things to sharpen my skill. And because I took that seriously, it was then something that became a revenue stream, something viable for me to actually do. And then once I took that serious, I had to do a different process than music, because music comes naturally. I can do music in my sleep, but with acting, you have more things to communicate with. You have body language, you have facial expressions, you have dialect, you have inflection, you have, it's a lot could be said with the eyes, right? And without saying a word. And so I had to incorporate all of these things into what I already knew in music and add things to it. So that's why I had to really work at acting. But because I worked at it, now it becomes something that people respect me for. And so now there's something that is, again, like I took it back to transcending. People don't expect me to do films like The X-Files or play an FBI agent, or, it's easy to play gangster number one. It's like, okay, great. All I got to do is just show up and just be Xzibit. You know what I'm saying? Like, but to step out of these roles and pick things that, are out of my wheelhouse and people don't expect me to be was refreshing. It is something for me to get focused on, because if it's intriguing to me, then I'm going to put 100% into it. And that's what acting was. It was like, wow, this is really dope. I'm seeing a different side of production. I'm seeing a different side of preparation. And it was exciting to me. So that's why I kept going with it.
Are you a new real estate agent or thinking about getting a real estate license? If so, you're going to want to ask about the Greater Property Group's Agent Scholarship Program. Why pay for the cost of the course yourself when the Greater Property Group will subsidize the cost for you? Make sure you reach out and get all the details on the Greater Property Group's Agent Scholarship Program. Man, that's so cool. Like a true artist, right? Dedication to the craft, the discipline it takes to actually be good at it. Right. Interesting breakdown. Okay, same thing. I'm going to give you a couple names first thoughts that come to mind when I say The Rock? What was it like working with The Rock?
Well, truly an incredible human being. To see him where he came from in his wrestling beginnings, his story of coming to, Los Angeles with, literally like $7 in his pocket, something like that. And to see where he is now, the highest paid actor in Hollywood, inspiration. The people gravitate to him is a gift, So I have the utmost respect for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I'm really glad to see how far his star has risen.
I got to ask you about Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Yes. Nicolas Cage. That's my guy too, man. We filmed the movie Bad Lieutenant, Port of New Orleans. And yes, he is as fun as people think he is. He's really, really dope to be around. He's really easy to work with. And man, I just learned a lot. Even working with Werner Herzog with that film was amazing. I mean, like, he's a legend in himself. So, being able to get around these people in the same way that I felt like when I was around Dr. Dre and going out on the Upper Smoke Tour and these doors were opening, the same way that happened, it happened in film and television for me. So, you never know until you take that first step. Nicolas Cage was really, really dope to work with. And, hopefully we'll be able to work together in the future.
What was it like working with Ice Cube on that movie?
Oh, man, I got a really dope story with Ice Cube. So again, this is my first movie that we filmed together. There was like these big car chase scenes. So I'm sitting in the car with Ice Cube and we do our first shot and I'm steering the car, you know what I'm saying? And we finish the shot and he leans over and he says, "Hey, when you drive a car, do you really like drive it like that?" Or because I was going like this, you know what I'm saying? Like Batman, you know what I'm saying? The Batman TV shows. And he says, "Yo, when you drive a car, show me how you drive." And I was like, "Oh, well, one hand, usually don't move that much." He just like, "Yo, well, you have to, less is more," right? Then the next scene, I was just kind of kept my hand still and it looked more realistic. Cube gave me some real pointers like on the spot as we were shooting this movie because he saw I was very inexperienced. He understands on a different level what the creative process is. So whenever I can learn from the people that came before me, I take heed to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for breaking that down. That's hilarious. That's actually really funny. Okay, let's move on to what you're doing now. Like, what projects are you working on? What's your company now? Can you tell us about it?
Well, 2020 was difficult for all of us. Nobody could move. Nobody was, really doing anything that was, essential. That it wasn't essential. It was the, essential businesses. So, I had been in the cannabis industry for quite some time. And so I started a new brand April of 2020 and right before the pandemic, and it's called Napalm Cannabis. It's been really well. It's been doing really well. And, we've had a lot of market penetration and, it's something that I enjoy doing. I like creating businesses from the ground up. So as I was sitting idle, I never have idle time, never wanted to get back on a hamster wheel. So I keep myself going forward. And so we're just feeling good about what we're doing here. Music is always the nucleus of what makes everything cool for me. So I do have a new project coming out called Kingmaker. And television and film, I've been kind of like, on the side for a minute because once they start working out the kinks and everybody gets, vaccinated and put together and how that all works, I'm going to let that kind of build itself. And then when it's time to step back in, I will.
Yeah, very cool. Sounds like you're content with everything you're doing. Okay, the final few questions here. This is the wrap up. This is in French, we call it the denouement.
All right.
The denouement. It's a couple fun ones. Really pick your brain, get to know who Xzibit is in here. If you could have dinner with any three people in history, past or present, who would they be and why?
Dinner with three people.
Any three people.
Bob Marley, because I feel like his energy and his wisdom and his insight on life was very unique to him. And it transcended through his music. And, even like having a moment with him to really just kind of hear what his, take on my life and his life, and if there's any comparisons whatsoever, and if there's any advice that he could give going forward, I would have definitely enjoyed that interaction. I'd like to have dinner with Barack Obama simply because, you know, what he was able to accomplish in life and would just be inspirational all the way around. I don't think there's any comparisons between me and him. But I mean, yes, of course, that would be awesome. And I guess the last one would be, and I'm not sure. But
Yeah,
those
well,
two for sure, definite.
Okay, so Bob Marley, Barack Obama, and it'll come to you.
Yeah, it'll come to me.
As you're answering the next question, it will come to you. You'll go, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Something like that. You know, something like that. But anyways, here's the next question, X. You're opening a bottle of champagne a year from now, celebrating something you've accomplished. What would that be?
Just being alive, you know? A year from now, nothing is promised. You know, every day is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So I don't know. I think just the way that I built my life, it changes from day to day, and I'm okay with that. So if I get a year from now, still making good decisions, positive decisions, then I can celebrate that all day, because the things that I'm setting myself up for are progressive. They are positive, and they are going to benefit my life in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Got you. Okay. So, and this is the last question, which is, have you thought about your place in hip hop history? Like, what is the legacy of the Alvin Joyner, AKA Xzibit body of work? Like, what will you be remembered for, your legacy?
I want people to look at what I've been able to accomplish and just realize that nothing good comes easy. Persevere, see it through. Go forward, get up 7 times if you got knocked down 7 times. Move in a fashion that you want people to respect you and give back to you. You have to be the change that you want to see. And if in hip hop, this is where I started, but a successful life is where I end up. That's where I want people to get from me, not just material things or monetization of opportunity. It's about like, I did and lived my life according to my own value system and was able to do it on my own terms. And at the end of the day, I crossed the finish line and was able to bring a lot of people with me. I think that's where I need to sit. That's why my new album is called Kingmaker. That's the one thing that I haven't done yet, is put other people in positions of power. And that's a good goal to have.
Oh, it's fantastic. What an interesting thought, eh? When you look back at, I mean, we're still young. We're still young, but when you look back, it's incredible. You still have an extra seat at that table. So I will be joining you for dinner that night. But I'll give you my 3. My 3 would be Xzibit, Dr. Dre, and Ice Cube. I think that would be.
Oh, hell yeah!
That'd be a great dinner.
Okay, cool. Let's go. I'm with it.
Let's go. X, what an absolute honor it was to have you on the show today. You're a true legend. You're a creative icon in so many ways. And it was so interesting to hear your story in a bit more detail and appreciate your creative body of work, talk about that, as well as some personal development questions and some business takeaways. I thought that was really, really good. So I do really appreciate your time today, man. Like, I'm a big fan, have been for a long time. And I know a lot of our listeners are as well.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.